They say, as long as you leave enough money behind, your children will never have to worry. But the truth? It's often the exact opposite. Most inherited wealth disappears within a single generation. Why is it that families like the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, or the Buffetts can preserve their fortunes for centuries, while most of us watch ours vanish within a few decades? It's not because they had more money. It's because they had a completely different mindset. This video will reveal what most parents never teach their children about money, a lesson far more valuable than any physical inheritance. If your goal is to leave behind more than just dollars and assets, if you want to build a legacy that shapes lives and echoes through generations, don't skip this video. Watch until the very end to uncover the principle that has helped the wealthiest families in history hold their ground through every crisis. Have you ever wondered why some families manage to preserve wealth for generations, while others lose everything in just a few short years? I used to think it was luck, that all it took was catching the right opportunity at the right time. But the more I observed, the more I read, the clearer it became. Wealth isn't a one-time event. It's a system, and that system isn't built on luck. It comes from a financial playbook, refined and passed down over hundreds of years, but rarely shared outside of a few tightly knit communities. Yes, this playbook is real, and today I want to open its most powerful pages. Pages filled with timeless financial principles that have helped countless Jewish families preserve and grow their wealth through war, economic collapse, and global upheaval. What's remarkable is these principles aren't complicated. You don't need an MBA. You don't need to work on Wall Street. They're simple, practical, and when applied properly, they can break the cycle of financial struggle that so many people around you are still trapped in. There's one number I want you to remember. 70% of wealthy families in America lose their wealth by the second generation. By the third, that number jumps to 90%. We can blame the markets. We can blame reckless spending. We can even blame bad luck. But the truth is this: the families that keep their wealth aren't luckier. They're systemized. They think differently. They act differently. And they live by a set of principles most Americans have never even heard of. Ray Dalio, one of the most respected investors in the world, founder of Bridgewater Associates, spent years studying how Jewish families build wealth across generations. He once said, "The biggest mistake most people make is not thinking in multigenerational terms." Dalio didn't just admire those principles, he applied them. And in doing so, built a financial empire that commands global respect. Today, I'll share with you 7 core financial principles from that very same playbook. 7 rules that have helped families not only build wealth, but sustain prosperity across time. Each principle is a vital piece of the larger puzzle, not just to help you escape today's financial stress, but to lay a foundation of strength for your children and their children after them. But whatever you do, don't miss rule number 1, because that's the one that separates families who build lasting legacies from those who experience success only once. Rule number 7, money is not a taboo. I grew up in a typical American household where money was always considered a sensitive topic. My parents never talked to me about spending, saving, or investing. But I remember the furrowed brows, the arguments over utility bills, and the heavy silences every time someone brought up finances. I entered adulthood with a diploma in my hand and an empty wallet. I could analyze Shakespeare, but I had no idea how to budget. I could write a 10-page essay, but I didn't know how to read a bank statement. And then I repeated the exact same mistakes my parents made. Meanwhile, Jewish families had a completely different approach. For them, financial education isn't optional. It's a foundational part of raising a child. Jewish children are introduced to the concept of money from a very young age. They're encouraged to save a portion of their allowance, invited to take part in family spending discussions, and even taught the difference between assets and liabilities while they're still in elementary school. I remember watching an interview with Mark Cuban, billionaire investor and owner of the Dallas Mavericks, where he talked about how his parents taught him to earn money as a kid. He used to sell garbage bags door to door in his neighborhood, collecting every single dime he could. That experience taught him a powerful lesson. Money comes from the value you create, and you must learn how to use it wisely. This isn't just a story about money. It's about how we perceive money. If you were taught that money is bad, that it causes conflict, that it's something not to be discussed at the dinner table, then how can you possibly develop a healthy relationship with your finances? On the other hand, if you learn that money is a tool, nothing more, nothing less, and that you can control it the way you steer a car, then your financial future will look completely different. As someone who grew up in a typical American household, I know firsthand how overwhelming it feels to face money matters for the first time. From an early age, I was taught how to spell and do math, but no one ever taught me how to spend or save. In many families around me, money was practically a forbidden topic, like just saying the word would spark tension. Children were told, that's grown-up stuff. You don't need to know. And so we grew up in the dark, watching but never learning. Then one day, I encountered a different mindset, the mindset of traditional Jewish families. And everything changed. In those homes, financial education isn't an optional add-on. It's as essential as learning to read or write. Children are included in age-appropriate financial conversations, not to burden them, but to empower them. To them, money isn't something mysterious or frightening. It's a tool. And if you know how to use that tool, it will serve you. I was especially struck by one simple yet powerful method many Jewish families use. They call it the 5-jar system. Every dollar a child receives is divided into 5 parts. 10% for charity, 20% for investing, 10% for saving, 50% for necessities, and the remaining 10% for fun spending. It might sound small, but don't let its simplicity fool you. That consistent, intentional division teaches children one of the most important financial truths. Every dollar has a purpose, not just for spending, but for growing, not just for enjoying, but for giving, and above all, for building the future. You don't need to be a financial expert or Jewish to apply this. A few envelopes or plastic jars and a small weekly allowance are enough. When your child receives $10, sit down and divide it together. $1 for charity, $2 for investing, $1 for saving, $5 for needs, and $1 for whatever they please. It's not about the amount. It's about the habit. And habits formed early become character later. I once met a boy, only 16 years old, but he already understood investment risk, long-term growth, and responsible spending. Meanwhile, his peers were still confused about the difference between a debit and a credit card. Can you imagine? By the time he turned 18, he had a tidy investment portfolio, a stable savings account, and, most impressively, a level of financial confidence most adults still don't have. We're talking about a massive head start, one that could alter the course of an entire financial journey. But even with a solid financial foundation, there's still one more element, one that seems small but carries enormous weight. It's a decision most Americans make before the age of 25, and that single choice determines the direction of their finances for decades to come. And that brings us to the next principle, an essential page in the Jewish playbook for building lasting wealth. I'd eventually succeed, but then I realized, if I'm pouring my energy into a sinking boat, no matter how hard I row, I'll always stay stuck in the same place, exhausted and going nowhere. That's exactly where the difference lies, in the way many Jewish families approach career thinking. They don't simply teach their children to chase passion or find a high-paying job. They teach them to pursue fields that create significant value, generate outstanding income, and, most importantly, offer scalable impact beyond the time limits of one individual. Look at the industries where Jewish representation is most concentrated: medicine, law, finance, and tech. This isn't a coincidence. These sectors share 3 critical traits: strong and sustainable demand, above-average income, and the ability to leverage, to multiply influence. A great doctor can treat 20 to 30 patients a day, but a doctor who becomes the founder of a healthcare company, like Elizabeth Holmes attempted with Theranos despite the failure, or Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, who developed a groundbreaking cancer treatment, can impact millions of lives while building a billion-dollar fortune. Or take Mark Zuckerberg. Born into a Jewish family, he didn't just work in tech. He created a platform with limitless scalability, breaking beyond personal limits. Facebook isn't just a company. It's a massive lever that allowed Mark to build global influence, even though he has the same 24 hours in a day as the rest of us. Meanwhile, many Americans still choose their careers based solely on interest or initial salary. They overlook the most crucial factor for building true wealth: the power of leverage, and the ability to create systems that generate income even while you sleep. But even that's not enough. One of the most vital principles I've learned from the Jewish community is this: never rely on a single stream of income. Even high-earning professionals often maintain side businesses or personal investment portfolios. This doesn't stem from greed. It comes from foresight and the desire to create new opportunities. They understand that every additional income stream is another layer of protection against life's uncertainties. Think back to the COVID-19 pandemic. Millions of Americans lost their only source of income overnight. Meanwhile, those who had already built second or third income streams from real estate, stocks, or online businesses managed to stay grounded, confident, and moving forward. So now I must ask myself, and I encourage you to do the same: is my current job just enough to pay the bills, or does it truly have the power to build long-term wealth? And if it's not enough, can I start building a new income stream, even a small one, starting today? This is where many people stumble. They try to go it alone. They struggle, hustle, and fight their battles in isolation. But the truth is, behind nearly every great fortune in this world is a strong support network. The Jewish community understands this more than anyone else. They don't go alone. And that, perhaps, is the real secret behind their generational wealth. In the next part, I'll show you exactly how they build those networks and why they might be the most powerful accelerators in your journey to financial freedom. That spirit of giving, when repeated long enough, comes back to you in ways you could never predict. They don't help to get something back, but more often than not, they receive far more than they ever expected. If you haven't started building your network yet, now is the time. Pick 3 people in your field whom you admire, even if you've never met them. Send them something of value. It could be a helpful article, a genuine compliment about their work, or a thoughtful introduction. Don't ask for anything. Just plant the seed, and you'll see. If you nurture those seeds well, they'll grow into a forest of opportunity that no one can reach alone. While I was still busy chasing the next breakthrough investment strategy, a Jewish friend once asked me a question that left me speechless. What if the most powerful wealth-building tool was right there, in your own neighborhood, and you just never noticed it? I didn't understand at first, but soon after, I began to see a truth that most Americans continue to miss: the economic power of a local community. The next principle I learned from them, and I now call it the hidden leverage of finance, is this: money should circulate within your own community. Think about it for a moment. Why are there neighborhoods where the dollar seems to constantly circulate, sustaining small businesses and keeping local life vibrant, while in others, the money disappears almost as soon as it reaches people's hands? The difference isn't in income, it's in spending habits. The Jewish community understands deeply. Every dollar spent within your network isn't just a purchase. It's an investment in your own future. I saw this with my own eyes in Brooklyn. There, people choose to buy groceries from someone they know, repair their cars at a garage run by a neighbor, or hire an old classmate for accounting services. They understand that every dollar they spend doesn't exit the system. It comes back full circle. It could help fund your child's school, support your nephew's startup, or sustain the very community center you visit every week. Economists call this the local multiplier effect. Research shows that every dollar spent at a local business can generate 3 to 5 times more economic value than money spent at a national chain. And in tightly knit communities like the Jewish one, that multiplier becomes even more powerful. Here's a simple example. John earns $5,000 a month. He spends it all at Walmart, Amazon, and other global companies. Within days, most of his money has vanished from his community without leaving any real impact behind. Now, take Sarah, who lives on the same block and earns the same amount. But she buys her coffee from a local cafe, hires her father's friend to fix the plumbing, and shops at a grocery store owned by her former classmate. The same $5,000 continues to nourish the very neighborhood she lives in. I'm not saying you should boycott all big corporations. What I've learned is this: spend intentionally. Before every major purchase, I now ask myself, is there someone in my network or my community I could buy this from? That question, simple as it may sound, completely shifts the trajectory of your finances, and not just yours, but everyone around you. Starting today, try this. Identify 5 products or services you regularly purchase, and see if you can get them from someone you know. Maybe it's the small bakery on the corner, a friend who sells skincare online, or the mechanic who lives just down the street. You'll be surprised by the change, not just in your wallet, but in the sense of connection you feel with the people around you. I still remember the day a financial mentor of mine shared this with me. At first, it seemed like such a small idea. But over time, I began to understand. This was a core wealth-building principle, one the Jewish community had quietly mastered. Instead of buying books from giant online retailers, I started visiting the tiny bookstore around the corner, where the owner remembered my name and could recall my favorite title from last year. When I needed an accountant, I stopped browsing through online ads and instead called someone within my professional circle, a person I trusted, knowing that by hiring him, I wasn't just paying for a service. I was investing in someone who was part of my community. These little changes may seem insignificant at first, but in reality, according to economists, every dollar spent at a local business circulates within that community 3 to 5 times before it exits. That's the local multiplier effect. And in a connected Jewish community, it's even more powerful because of their deeply intentional spending habits. Warren Buffett once said, "The best investment you can make is in yourself." But I believe that right after investing in yourself, the next most important investment is in your community. However, keeping money circulating within the community is only half of the financial equation. There's another habit, one even more important. It's a principle that the Jewish community treats as sacred, not optional. It's the mindset of investing, not as something you do when you have spare cash or extra time, but as a non-negotiable duty if you truly want to build lasting wealth. I used to think investing was something you should do eventually. Once everything was stable, once the bills were under control, once life settled down. But then I realized that mindset is exactly why so many good, hardworking people around me, people with steady jobs, are stuck on the same financial hamster wheel their whole lives. Because the truth is this: investing isn't something you do after you've got money to spare. It's a responsibility, a commitment to your future. In Jewish financial culture, this principle is treated with a sense of sacred duty. It's not a preference, it's a moral obligation. There's a line in the Talmud that shook me awake. A person should divide their money into 3 parts: one for land, one for business, and one to keep in hand. Modern investments may look different, but the wisdom is timeless. Diversify. Stay disciplined. Make investing a top priority. I began to ask myself, if 2 people both earn $60,000 a year, but one starts investing right away and the other waits until they have enough, what happens after 30 years? Let's take Mike. He invests when he remembers, when it feels convenient. A little into his 401k. And that's it. Then there's Sarah. She does something most people never dare. She takes 20% off every paycheck before spending a dime. After 3 decades, Mike might have around $150,000 saved. But Sarah, with the exact same income, ends up with over $1.2 million. That's nearly an 8-fold difference from a single habit. And I realized the Jewish community doesn't just invest in stocks and bonds. They invest across asset classes, paper assets, businesses, their own or others, and real estate. Each serves a purpose. Real estate protects against inflation and provides tax advantages that stocks don't. Meanwhile, business investments offer growth potential bonds could never match. So I started doing it. No waiting for extra money. I began with $50 or $100 from each paycheck. I set up automatic transfers the moment my paycheck landed. That one decision forced me to build my lifestyle around what remained, instead of investing whatever was left over. If you've never invested before, Start with low-cost index funds like the Vanguard 500 or Fidelity Zero. You don't have to be a financial expert. You just need to be consistent. Because true wealth doesn't come from lottery wins or lucky breaks. It comes from the quiet discipline of turning income into assets over and over again. But wait, don't leave just yet. What I'm about to share might surprise you. Not all debt is bad. In fact, there's a type of debt that, if you know how to use it, can become a launch pad, accelerating your path to financial freedom faster than you ever imagined. I used to believe every loan was a burden, until I learned the difference between two concepts that sound similar but are fundamentally opposite: destructive debt and constructive debt. There are debts that suffocate you, like maxing out a credit card for a luxury vacation or financing a brand new car that starts losing value the moment it leaves the lot. That's destructive debt. It drains your cash flow and leaves you with liabilities that depreciate over time. But then there's a completely different kind of borrowing, one that acts as leverage. This is the kind of debt that serves a long-term financial purpose. A mortgage for a rental property, a business loan to expand a thriving venture. This is productive debt, the kind that builds wealth, not just for you, but for the generations that follow. I'll never forget the story of two friends, James and Michael, a vivid illustration of how different choices lead to different futures. Both borrowed $20,000. James used this to vacation in the Maldives and buy a high-end sound system. 5 years later, all he had to show for it were a few fading photos and an outdated speaker. Michael? He used the same amount as a down payment on a $100,000 rental property. 5 years later, that property was worth $130,000 and generated steady monthly income from tenants, who, in effect, were paying down his loan for him. It's no coincidence that Warren Buffett, the sixth richest man in the world and one of America's greatest investors, once said, "If you buy things you don't need, soon you'll have to sell things you do need." That's not just a warning, it's a survival strategy. Wealthy people don't avoid debt. They simply choose the right kind, the kind that helps them acquire assets, not lifestyles. They treat debt as a tool. Meanwhile, the middle class often uses it to chase things they can't truly afford. So I urge you, re-examine the debts you currently carry. Sort them into two clear groups: debt that builds assets and debt that drains your income into things that lose value. Create a plan to aggressively eliminate unnecessary consumer debt, starting with the ones with the highest interest. And moving forward, every time you're tempted to borrow money, pause and ask yourself, will this debt help me create value or just burn through my cash? Financial freedom doesn't come from owning everything you want. It comes from owing nothing for things that lose value by the day. When you learn to cut out destructive debt and use constructive debt the right way, you begin taking the first solid steps toward building lasting wealth. And maybe, just maybe, a legacy for your children. The lesson that completely transformed how I think about money came from a deceptively simple principle. Think in terms of generations, not just months or years. I used to be like everyone else. When making financial decisions, I'd build a monthly budget or try to optimize my annual taxes. But then I noticed something. Wealthy Jewish families who have maintained generational wealth don't operate that way. They view money through the lens of time. Not in months or years, but in decades and lifetimes. And that long-term mindset changes everything from how they buy a home to how they invest in education, manage assets, and eventually pass them on. I began noticing the difference in even the smallest decisions. The average American sells their home every 5 to 7 years. Why? Because their needs change, or because of an emotional impulse, or because they don't see short-term gains. But a Jewish family with generational vision, they'll buy property with a 50 or even 100-year horizon. They choose locations with long-term growth potential, invest in durable infrastructure, and plan to preserve and hand down those properties to grandchildren and beyond. And it doesn't stop at real estate. It's the same with education. While many parents struggle just to cover tuition for their kids, families who understand the power of generational finance begin creating education funds for grandchildren who haven't even been born yet. Take the Vanderbilt family. an iconic example of legacy wealth in America. From the very first generation, they established education trusts. And today, those funds have paid tuition for 6 generations. 6. It might sound abstract, but the math is crystal clear. If you invest $10,000 with a steady 7% return per year, you'll have about $40,000 after 20 years. But if you let that investment grow for 75 years, across 3 generations, it skyrockets to over $1.50 million without adding a single dollar more. The problem? Most people don't have the patience to go that far. They pull their money out too soon. They miss the miracle of compound interest. If you truly want to create a lasting change for your family, start today. Write a financial declaration for your family. What is this wealth for? How should it grow? And how will future generations continue to protect it? Start by opening a 529 college savings account. Not just for your children, but for your future grandchildren. If you're running a business, don't focus solely on short-term profits. Create a generational transition plan. And most importantly, talk to your kids about money early. Tell them why you invest. Show them how your wealth is structured. Give them small financial responsibilities. Let them grow up with a mindset for financial stewardship. I used to think that leaving money behind for my children would be enough. But I've come to realize the greatest inheritance I can give isn't money. It's financial wisdom. It's not about how much wealth you accumulate. It's about whether the next generation has the understanding to preserve and multiply it. Because without that, no matter how large the estate, wealth vanishes. Sometimes in a single generation. This isn't just a theory. It's a lesson history has confirmed again and again. Do you know why so many Jewish families have held onto wealth for centuries, surviving wars, economic crises, and persecution? It's because they passed down more than just money. They passed down knowledge, principles, and a long-term perspective. They raised their children to be guardians, stewards, and ultimately, builders of wealth. Generation after generation, they taught each other how to think beyond the span of a single lifetime. I once read about the Rothschilds, one of the most iconic families of enduring wealth. They weren't just brilliant investors. They laid strong foundations for their descendants by prioritizing education, mentorship, and financial responsibility from a young age. Even Warren Buffett, the 5th richest man in the world, doesn't simply give his wealth to his children. He established firm principles for inheritance, requiring that they learn that they bring their own value to the table and that they truly understand what wealth means. I used to be a consumer of wealth, spending based on short-term needs. But I made a decision to change. I wrote a financial declaration for my family, outlining our financial goals, our asset strategy, and each member's responsibility in preserving and growing it. I began having real conversations with my children about investing, about saving, about the value of time in building wealth. Not through dry theory, but through stories, through real decisions within our family. And today, I want you to begin too. Don't wait. Financial wisdom only matters when it's acted on in time. If this principle has helped shift your perspective on wealth, tell me, on a scale from 1 to 10, how valuable was this lesson to you? And where will you start? Maybe you'll begin by teaching your child the 5-jar system for managing money, or by building a serious professional network, or simply by automating your investments before spending on personal desires. Whatever you choose, start this week. Because I've always believed true wealth isn't just having more money. It's having choices. It's having peace. And it's having the power to create positive impact for generations to come. And that journey begins with a single step. In the end, if there's one thing I hope you take away from this video, it's this. Money can be lost, but the right financial wisdom can save an entire bloodline. We're not just earning money for today. We're laying the foundation for generations to come. And the difference between someone who merely spends money and someone who builds a legacy lies in how they think about time, about responsibility, and about the true meaning of wealth. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. That means more than you know. If today's story touched something in you, if you saw a part of yourself in this journey, leave us a comment below. What challenges are you facing right now in building financial stability, staying disciplined, or finding direction in your life? Tell us. We want to hear your story. We want to understand. And we want to create videos that speak directly to you to help you push through this season of struggle and rise into the strongest version of yourself. We'll see you in the next video, where every minute is a step forward on the journey to a meaningful life.